Hi, everybody. I'm super happy and excited to have with me for the first time two guests, actually. So this is the first episode where I have two guests. And this is justified because they have been working together for a long time. And we already had the chance to have a conversation before this some time ago. And it was amazing to see them both interact and, just talk about what they really know like nobody else. So I would just ask you guys to introduce yourself. We'll start, I guess, with Andrea with an A. So we'll go in alphabetical order.
Absolutely, that sounds good to me. So yes, I'm Andrea Stevens, and I'm really happy and super excited to be here as well. So yes, we've been speaking to you before, right, Rita, about our experience. Rodrigo and I, we both work for a large language services provider, one of the two biggest, I think, around the world, right? And yeah, we're really excited to have a chat and to talk about our experiences and how we got to where we are.
Mm-hmm. And Rodrigo, just a little bit. I've learned now that Rodrigo is actually Chilean, and I'm very excited because I think this is the first Chilean person I've ever seen. So I'm like,
Yes, I'm Rodrigo Fuentes Carrari. I come from Chile originally. I was born in Chile a number of years ago, but my parents ended up moving for political reasons to the UK. So after the political strife in the 70s, we came to the UK. I've gone back to Chile, and now I've come back to Europe. So again, I've been working with Andrea, large LSP now for 15 years, maybe more, together with Andrea,
So.
20 years maybe
Probably
at the
more.
company itself. So yeah, we've been working really, and the part that we work in is really to do with machine translation and linguistic AI. It's been a long relationship with Andrea and a long relationship with this project. So we started back in 2007. So I'm super excited again, as Andrea said, to be here. It's new for us to be sharing these experiences, but we've seen your podcast and we really enjoyed them. And like we said earlier, we wanted to give it a go.
yeah.
So let's see how we go.
Yeah, that's great because I always say that I just told you this, you guys, but this is what I do. I think that it's really important for everybody involved in the industry to also have a perspective, a personal perspective from people who actually work for those, mythical or mystical for some people, large LSPs, right? Since I worked on the other one.
Yes, that is true.
On the other big one. And I know what people think about it, how people feel about it. Maybe they don't feel the same way about both. Well, that's irrelevant now. But the truth is that I thought it was a great idea to have you guys here because you worked in the machine translation AI department of all things. And I think we're missing and lacking a lot of information, especially from somebody's point of view. And it's just not somebody, right? Because I could also give you my opinion, but that's irrelevant because you guys have been there since, your companies have started to, or your company started to implement. I say companies because now it's more than one, and it used to be
Absolutely,
one and
yes.
then that one, but it's just what happens now for a long time. But it's just to have an idea on how things evolved and your personal take on all of that. So I would just ask Andrea. So when you first started working for this large LSP, I mean, at some point, just say the name if you want to. I mean, it's written right there in our image. And then what did you expect? What was your idea?
So, I mean, first of all, right, when I started working for what at the time was SDL, here exactly. I said it wasn't large at all, right?
Oh, it wasn't?
No, I think when I started there were about 20 people maybe. Sort of, maybe 25, 30, roughly half of them kind of translators with a few project managers. And we started a couple of engineers in DTP. So it was really very, very small and it was very familiar. So when I started, I was in fact the third German translator that started there. So and we had French translators, Spanish and Italian, sort of that was roughly the mixture. So it was quite small. And it was honestly, it was more by pure chance because I'm German, so I live in the UK, but I'm German, and it was more pure chance that I came to the UK because after I finished my studies, I had two job offers, one in a really small agency in Denmark, and the other one in a fairly small agency here in Maidenhead in the UK, right? So I had to kind of weigh up what I wanted to do, and I thought, well, English is always kind of the better choice, right? I better, it gives me gives me sort of better opportunities probably than, you know, going to Denmark. So I'd studied English and Italian at uni, but I also did a year, 8 or 9 months in Copenhagen studying Danish. So I'm not very good at it anymore, but it was a great experience. I loved it. Honestly, it was so nice. So yeah, so the experience was really interesting actually, because we were all, you know, really young in our mid-20s, and we worked a lot and we partied a lot, I think. Yes. is maybe the best way to describe it, because we were all of a similar age. And but from a work perspective, actually, I learned so much. I think because we were small, and at the beginning we had mainly IT projects, I think. So, you know, we had engineers there on site. So, you know, we sat with the engineers. They took a computer apart for us. They told us what all the different parts are, how it all goes together, you know, and you know, with the DTP guys as well, the DTP people, we just, you know, we learned so much about the other disciplines as well, because it was such a small company, and because, you know, we all kind of worked together very closely, that, you know, and in terms what I learned for translation, and, you know, and in terms of what I learned in terms of technical knowledge, that was amazing. And I had at the time, you know, also I had a really, really good line manager who was, you know, he was quite strict, you know, it was, but it was, you know, we've come fresh out of uni, first job, so you sometimes really don't know what to do. So, you know, he would actually go and just take our translations, correct them, come back to us, explain what, you know, what wasn't right with it, and then we were implementing it. And I think that was such a great way to learn, because, you know, we learned on the job really, but we weren't left alone. So we were given so much feedback, you know, from the people around us, that for me, I mean, that was a really formative experience, I think. And I think that really, really made me a better translator as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot, because I thought that, you know, so I thought you had already started at a big company. I had that impression. So
no,
obviously
not
I
at
was
all.
Totally wrong.
Not at all. It obviously grew into a big company, but it,
yes.
You know, yes, I started there when it was really still quite small.
Okay. What about you, Rodrigo? In that case, that's the same situation, right?
No, I'm going to.
No, because you didn't start there, right?
No, I'm going to feel a little embarrassed now, because I mean, I haven't actually heard all of Andrea's story, even though we've known each other for a long time. But that seems very well thought out, Andrea. You know, like a good, I guess, you know, mind in terms of career progress. I left university. I studied kind of languages and literature. I must have left university when I was 23, maybe something like that. But I didn't really get a job till I was 30 to some degree.
Oh, that's a good approach.
I went to Chile, and I kind of stumbled around. I think I always used my language skills. I ended up teaching English. I think invariably lots of people do that. I then taught literature. I liked always literature. I remember my dad said to me, he said to me, try to delay working as long as you can, because once you start, you won't finish. And,
right.
and this comes from somebody, my dad's a very responsible man, engineer, always, very career and family focused. So I kind of took that on board. I mean, I did have jobs clearly, but I was freelancing, I was writing and such. But it took a while till I kind of settled down and got into the language industry. So I started in a few jobs, got to SDL and followed a project management role. I was always quite bossy as a child, I think. My mum always described me as quite bossy. So
I think you're always quite bossy as a project manager as well, if I may say that.
You may say that. I think, yeah, it's true.
Was he a project manager at some point? No.
Yeah, that's how I started. I think I became a project manager, and I rose kind of through I would say, the project manager kind of pathway, which is, project manager, program manager, operations manager. It was at one point then that I kind of wandered over. SDL was a bigger organization at that point. So I wandered over to having lunch and saw just a job ad for what we called at the time, I think, was KBTS, knowledge-based translation system, which is a rules-based machine translation system. And I got interested in it. And I remember that's kind of where I met Andrea. Andrea had already been there for about a year, I think. And I think at that point, what we had was rules-based translation, which was quite clumsy, obviously. It was a lot of coding of terminology into the system. And I think myself and Andrea, it's interesting you were saying, Andrea, earlier about, you know, like the experience you got, but I think both of us arrived to that particular group with a fair amount of experience. We were more experienced than a lot of people that were working there. We were taking people to be in a group of translators that would help us build the engines that were quite young, quite fresh out of university, and they were very enthusiastic, but they probably needed honing in their craft and probably honing a little bit also in what it means to work in a commercial environment. So it started quite a lot as a laboratory in the sense that, you know, we were building engines, testing them, but it was always with an eye to have a context of the commercial part. I think that's probably where myself and Andrea kind of met and had kind of meeting of minds. I think we were a little older, and the context that it needed to be commercial was the kind of reality that I think myself and Andrea brought to the table there. I don't think, I mean, my memory is not brilliant. I mean, we're talking about 2007, 2008, so 15 years ago when we started with rules-based, we had this internal team. I might be wrong, Andrea, but I think we weren't popular with the rest of the group.
No, I don't think we necessarily were. But Rodrigo is right in that we brought a slightly different perspective to the table. So by that time, I started as a translator, and I worked for him a few years as a translator as well. So, you know, on really big projects as well. So it was a great experience. But as the company grew and the teams grew, I moved into line management. So I had a team of German translators that, you know, that I was working with. So, and when you do that, of course, you move away from translation and you go much more into, you know, training, mentoring, and reviewing, really, because that is, you know, that is the path. So, and it's not for everybody, right? But I think it's often, and you can maybe call it the fate of an in-house translator, that really in-house translators will end up doing more review work than, and you know, also, I guess, more admin work than just translation. Because you know, obviously, you know yourself, it's big projects, you need to outsource quite a lot. And then, of course, you know, your in-house role takes on a slightly different, sort of, you take on slightly different responsibilities. You know, you have 5 translators working freelance for you. So what you do in the end is not translate yourself, but you make sure that, you know, all of this, you know, is consistent, for example, all of this. So that's, you know, that is the role. And then, you know, when you go into line management, you obviously take on, you know, people management as well, people management responsibilities. So that is, it's a slightly different path, but, you know, it's one I really enjoyed. And from the line management, I moved into translation management. So I managed multilingual teams. Usually we had, you know, French, Italian, German, Spanish in-house, plus Brazilian Portuguese and Japanese. So I had teams in these languages, and, you know, some, like, you know, the French and Spanish teams are a bit bigger, the Japanese teams maybe a little bit smaller with 5 people. But so, you know, and that is when you, I think when you move into that role, then you get much more of a sense for the commercial realities that you're working with, because of course you know, and then this may be maybe, you know, news to some of your listeners in terms of, you know, what it entails as well. But of course, you know, you have a big team of people. You need to make sure those people have actually work to do. So, you know, so that they have enough work to do, that nobody sits there and has nothing to do. So you have to juggle outsourcing and insourcing, all these things. You know, you have to juggle sometimes the cost of these things as well. You know, how much you know it, you've done it, right? So it's just a reality that this is, you know, this is what happens. And I mean, to me, it was a really fulfilling role. You know, I loved the people management side of it. You know, I loved talking to my deputy at the time was Spanish, and you know, we had, you know, it was just great to talk to you know, work with people of so many different nationalities, to learn from them as well. And, you know, and to be able to just, you know, lead that team in that way. So, yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it, right? And then, of course, you know, as these things go, I went on maternity leave. So, So I went on maternity leave for the first time, and I came back to work in the same role. And then I went on maternity leave again relatively quickly for a second time. And when I came back, there was this actually really interesting role as a vendor manager in our new machine translation department, which is the one that Rodrigo mentioned.
Vendor management for machine translation department. Oh, Lord.
Yes, it wasn't the easiest role, shall we say, especially, with a rules-based machine translation system. And, they're very clumsy, but they have advantages as well. They're very predictable. Yeah. Which is maybe not something that you can say of later machine translation systems. Okay, but rules-based, you knew what you're getting. It was very clumsy. It was, word on word, but it was
yes, I remember those.
Predictable. Yes, I'm sure you do. And yes, this is where we met, Rodrigo and I.
So yeah, it's exactly because you guys would have to have a different mind. I always say, because I worked with a lot of translators, then what do you do after being a translator for for example, for a long period at a company? Yes. If you want to move on to something else, it's usually very complicated. And most translators that I know, and from my experience listening to people, they do not see themselves as the next obvious role from a company point of view, but not from a philosophical point of view, because you cannot ever say that someone who has the perfect skills to be a translator has the perfect skills to be a project manager or anything in that position, right? Because it doesn't make sense, because it's a whole other perspective. But I always say that it's the role and anything, well, because it has different terminologies throughout the companies, right? But it is the role where you actually have an overview like nothing else, right? You can see the side of the client, you can see the side of the company, and you can see the side of your in-house people and of your freelancers. So this is like all the worlds collide within this one figure, right? And so, Rodrigo, sure. you have a lot of experience on this, obviously, so you know much better than I do.
And just going back a little bit to what Andrea was saying, when I met Andrea, I mean, you were coming back from your second maternity leave. I was going into my first paternity leave, so I have one daughter. So around that time, I think, just as professionals, I think we've done a lot of things. Myself, Andrea, I'd never met Andrea before. We worked by that stage.
No, I hadn't met Rodrigo either, I have to say.
So only after kids, right? Only after having
only
kids.
After kids.
So I think there's a couple of things. I think, on a personal level, I was more focused. I was becoming a dad, and that was, like obviously an experience which changes you and maybe formalizes you as a person, obviously. I mean, I don't know about you, Andrea, but I stopped partying. I don't know. At that point.
Yes, I think I stopped partying a little bit before then. So, yes.
So I think that was interesting that we met at that point. So we brought, I think, the professional and the personal focus. I mean, one of the things I remember saying very early on in a job interview was, what was my best asset as a person? One of my assets, I always say, is I'm quite lazy, which in a job interview doesn't always go down very well. But then, I usually get a chance to explain it. I think I don't like wasting time. So I like being at home. I like relaxing. I like looking out the window and reading. But I have to earn that. And that laziness that I want to earn has to come through some form of efficiency at work. So things at work have to be really efficient as much as possible. Clearly, I think, that when I joined the machine translation project, it was very different to, I would say, what I was doing before. Everything else was much more predictive. We were building something at that time. And so the reactions that we got from customers or from the supply chain were somewhere between curiosity and horror, I'd say. And I think
more on the side of horror, I would say.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, there was nobody really at that point, that I think, the great stakeholders, whether you are a customer and somebody approaches you to say, you want to do machine translation on your content, that was something, well, what about the quality? So I think that was a conversation that needed to be persuasive and based on data. I think within our own organization, there was trepidation. SDL had huge in-house linguistic teams, so huge amounts of expertise, huge amounts of opinion about the subject. And I think, like within the company, and also, I think also, in the supply chain. So I think that we had to go about that and look for people that were curious. I think that was the thing. And when you used to call up it's an interesting thing when you used to call up the freelancers. So we had to build our own supply chain. at that point. That was something, that Andrea did. And I helped with, with my project managers, I helped to do that as well. But it wasn't always that people wanted to do that work. There were more people that would possibly say, I'm actually not interested in doing that. So their point of reference or their frame of reference was always something like, open machine translation on the web. Even though that I think that we had the advantage of being able to encode the terminology, which sped things up a lot, it was still very clunky to work with. So I think the personal skills that we had at that point, the maturity of being told, like, actually not interested and having several doors closed to us, I think we were both lucky, Andrea, that we were kind of like thick-skinned. I think it wasn't for everybody.
No, it wasn't an easy job, but I think, as I said, it was very interesting because, as Rodrigo said, we were trying to build something that hadn't really been done before. And, we were obviously lucky as well to work there with a team of translators or post editors that were interested in what we were doing, right? So we had, I think, Rodrigo, how many did we have in-house? 20, 25 translators?
We grew to nearly 30.
Nearly 30,
and
yeah.
I think that the languages with rules-based were actually some quite interesting. We had FIGS, we had Portuguese.
Yeah.
I think we started on Finnish and Swedish. Yes. So we started to grow quite big.
So we had interesting languages, and we had a team that was really keen as well. But there wasn't the interest from clients that is today when you talk about machine translation, AI, and the efficiencies you can have with it, but also the advantages it brings you. There was just really, even with clients, there was really none of that. In the beginning, I think we had 2 clients, one from the travel industry and one who was a manufacturer of agricultural machinery, right? So these were our first 2 clients. And of course, what we tried to do in terms of the supply chain, you obviously want to keep the expertise on the project. You just want to switch it from translation to post-editing to a post-editing framework. And
that's super easy to do. People will be like, oh, sure, there's no
absolutely.
problem.
Yes, no problems at all. I mean, a weekend we had everyone. No, so yes, from that point of view, it was quite difficult because I prefer to do things, when it came to asking people about post-editing, to do it by the phone, really, because it's better to have a conversation with people, right? And the answer, as Rodrigo said, was often no. We're really not interested. But, to be fair as well, there were a few who were actually interested, who thought, yes, you know what, let's give it a go. Let's see how this goes. But, I think it was no more often than yes. And so we also felt, we needed to start going to find other people, maybe people that hadn't worked on the project before, but that were interested in post-editing. So you have to find a balance there.
Yeah, exactly.
And I completely agree also that post-editing is maybe not for everybody. So, I understand. And then even to this day, it's not for everyone. So I completely understand if people turn it down and if people don't want to do it. And I think, everybody should have the choice. If you're a freelancer, obviously, you should have the choice whether you want to post-edit or not. That's entirely up to you. But we were working very hard to build a supply chain and to build a pool of freelancers that were actually willing to post-edit, willing to give it a try, and then hopefully also carry on with it. Because that was one of the things, Rodrigo, I think that we talked about already in the beginning, really early. Post-editing, it needs to be a sustainable proposition. Okay, you can't have people who say, well, I'm going to take one job in post-editing and then I really don't like it, and then I'm going to move off. Yeah. So everything has to work together in a way, the sort of, quality has to get better in terms of machine
And you guys had some
translation.
sort of training going on or specific instructions, all of those things, I suppose.
Yeah, all those things. And of course, sorry, I was just going to say, at the time, of course, machine translation got better by encoding terms, by encoding words and so on. But yeah, I mean, we did start out to roll a training program fairly soon, I think, right? So we started quite small there as well.
I think it's interesting that another thing that I share with Andrea is that we're quite ideas led. I think we're ideas-led and narrative-led. And I think that at the beginning, I sat down with Andrea and there was another colleague of ours as well. And we needed to document things, we needed to document data points, productivity gains, those kind of things. But we needed to work out quite quickly what the narrative was, something that people could, and obviously, if you look at the linguistic community and translators, they're very well educated. I mean, they're not just they're skilled in language. I mean, a lot of them speak several languages, have lived in many countries. And so I think you have to appeal in that respect to the idea behind it. Why are we doing this? What advantage will you get? And obviously we have to project a future of, growing content and the inability to kind of do all that content in the same way. And so we subscribed to that idea and had to build out quite a bit. I think we had to have values at the beginning as well. I think I sat down with you, Andrea, I remember having this conversation about, I think we're both quite hardworking people. But I think one of the things that we also, I think, shared was kind of we needed a clarity of vision. And in Andrea's hopefully not going to laugh again, but empathy was kind of the key thing that I think we needed to understand. And it was something that very early on we kind of needed to recognize what our audience was and try to kind of empathize with the change that we believed. We're talking about 2007, so it's a long time ago that we believed was going to come. And kind of figure out, okay, what kind of change was going to come? How would it affect them? How do we kind of get people on board? We started with data, showing people data. Look, you're faster. You can't argue with the fact that you did it faster, and that's it. But then I think we started to roll out training, and I think that's when I think it became, I think, more satisfying, because I think at the beginning, we felt a little bit. I hope I'm not exaggerating, Andrea, but I think we felt a bit kind of surrounded by lots of people that were not quite on board with our ideas, and we needed to kind of come up with some compelling arguments, and it felt quite defensive at the beginning. And I think after a while, we realized we just needed to change tactics. I think we did it with data to begin with, but it felt like that kind of stick. This is the data. Can't argue with data. But actually, people can argue with data, and they'll argue with data for quite a long time. How did you get that? And they're right to do it as well, because the data wasn't always harvested in the most efficient or, let's say, precise way. It was quite difficult to get data that we actually trusted at the beginning. We had to narrow down in our experiments to really make sure that what we were measuring was the post-editing effort, and there wasn't extra noise in the kind of equation, distractions, people being, stopping their work. We have to build a platform which measures precisely things like keystrokes in order to really get at the fact, that we were talking about the gains from post-editing and nothing else. It wasn't a gain from a translation memory or a terminology base. It was actually people, actually being able to edit faster because of the quality of the output. So I think the training then came along, and I think that was our second phase. So if we started in 2007, I think 2014 was the first time we rolled out certification. I might be slightly wrong there, Andrea, but that was the first time we said we actually need to go out with something. We had a plethora of internal documents, I imagine, and we used to send those out to the freelancers that we'd work with. But it wasn't until 2014 that we said all of this needs to come in a much more digestible format, right, Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we did. And Rodrigo is right about data, because the data, when we run these tests on whether somebody is faster with translation or post-editing, the data in almost all cases showed that people are faster with post-editing, even if they thought they were faster with translation. But the thing is, I think in this case, it wasn't really about the data. I think it was about how you feel about this new task. It's about a feeling. It's not, if you feel this is a task where you as a translator can't show your experience and your knowledge and your years of study and your value, then it's not going to fly, right? Because, I've been a translator, I've studied, obviously in Germany at the time, we studied a bit longer than, for example, in the UK. So I studied for 4 years, and you want to feel that all this knowledge is put to good use, right? And we had a sort of similar, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when, the first cat tools came in almost.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that, because
yes, and
working at SDL, and I'm not even sure, I was thinking to myself, was Stratus immediately released for the first time by you guys, or was it emerged later?
It wasn't actually. So so we worked, when I first started, we didn't work with a catch-all. And then obviously Trados sort of came about, but Trados was a separate company at that time. So right. And I didn't spend my whole life on the LSP side. So I worked for a bit for a large enterprise, and I specialized in enterprise resource planning software. So, and that's where I worked with Trados. And then at back at the LSP side, we then started developing SDLX. So we switched essentially from Trados to that. And but you know, even at the time, a lot of people were really concerned about, you know, how this would affect them. And now, I mean, you look now, sort of, it's everywhere. Nobody really works without, you know, a translation memory system of any description anymore, right? So especially not when you're in localization, let's say, you know.
For sure. Well, I know I went straight to localization, and the first time I worked ever, it was already with cat tools, and that was back in 2007, 8.
Yeah. So absolutely. So and then this was a little bit similar. And I think what we really felt is it's about, you know, hearts and minds and not the data. And this is why we started with the training. And you know, this wasn't only for supply chain. We also trained our internal teams, because, you know, post editing grew. You know, we are now, I think, one of the only language service providers who's got in-house translation team still. So we started, you know, training the in-house teams to take on post-editing work, because it had, you know, it grew bigger, it grew beyond our team essentially. So, you know, we had to scale that out. So, and, you know, it also wasn't always easy internally, because, you know, it's a change in process, it's a change in your work, you know, it's a change how you approach things, and some people are better to deal better with this than others. But that's why we started training. And Rodrigo quite rightly said, you know, we started with we thought, we have to have a program, you know, instead of having to individually go to people and say, yes, so for post editing, either we do like, you know, we actually went on site at times to our, you know, language offices and trained there as well, you know. But that's, of course, is also not sustainable over the long run. So you need to have something people can access easily and where they get the information they need. So that's why we started our certification program in 2014, actually. So this is sort of what brought us on that path, because, you know, by that time we'd already been working with machine translation for a good, you know, 7 years, and we felt it was not only about sharing knowledge or training people, but it was also about giving something back. And you know, at the time, sustainability and you know, corporate social responsibility was not such a big thing as it is now, right? And you know, I really think this is a great thing. But for us, it was about sustainability. Yes, you know, you want people to be trained and you want to attract talent to the industry as well, but you also really, you want to give something back. You know, you want to share some of the experience that you've built up over the years, you know, for other people, that they can have an easy path to learn that, or maybe an easier path than earlier translators had, I think.
That's actually obviously something I completely agree with about giving back, but I don't want to be remiss as well to kind of not put the perspective, for instance, the commercial perspective on this. So we clearly started to, I guess, build relationships with groups of translators, and there's a lot to be said with that, because it's not just about giving back. You end up taking as well. You take their feedback and you improve your engines. But there is a benefit to that quite clearly, and that's something that we all know, and it's quite clear in the dynamic. But also the certification did something else. I think it started to help us position our offering to our customers in a way in which they were more reassured. So I think that with myself and Andrea, we're kind of always working in these bridges. You know, I'm kind of a bridge to the commercial part, and she's the bridge maybe to what you'd call the supply chain. But there's benefits that we both create together that we use to our own, I guess, objectives. I mean, we work very closely together, but quite often we're working also apart in different areas and such. So for the customers, knowing that, they were able to migrate, or we were able on their behalf to migrate all that subject matter expertise. So the translator, and this happens quite a lot in the industry, some translators will work on a project with a customer client for a very long time, and they know that terminology inside out. Yeah. And the last thing you want to do when you make a change in the process is to lose all of that experience. It jeopardizes the quality, and that can jeopardize pretty much a lot of things commercially as well. So for us, it was a tool. I think it'd be remiss in saying that we were doing it because we believed in it clearly, and Andrea is much more connected to that through her experience and on an emotional level too. But I saw also, to be fair, I saw the commercial opportunity of having something that would differentiate ourselves when we had that customer discourse. And I think if we fast forward now to where we are now with linguistic AI, I think there is a gap to be filled in terms of what the customer knows about its roadmap, its future roadmap. And I think all of these things just help us have a richer discussion, and it leads to inevitably what we need in the industry, in all parts of the industry, which is trust. So you need to be able to kind of trust in the supply chain that they're able to take on new tools and new processes, and you need your customers to trust in you that you can do that and not lose all of that valuable insight and knowledge that they've had up till now. They want a different process and they want to see the benefits of AI, but they certainly don't want to lose on other aspects, anything to do with scale, security, and quality. So for us, I guess, it's about building trust, across the network of stakeholders that we have to work with. And I think that's kind of like a little bit about, the other side of the coin. Yes, we work with supply chain. We have very defined objectives there. But we also have to, as we started in 2007, everything has a commercial context, what we're doing. And I think that's a reality that I think there's a new reality to be built over the next period around AI. And, there won't be consensus. People will agree or disagree. But as much as we can build that kind of true reality in context in which we're working in, we're more likely to succeed. And I think that's, probably one of the things about the project that Andrea really leads on. I contribute where I can, but it's about building a more sustainable reality. When we sit down and have a discussion with a customer or with a freelancer, it can be complex. People have different interests. They're safeguarding their craft, or they're safeguarding their product, and they just want to know that we kind of thought out what we're trying to put across. It's well thought out. And I think by exposing that information in the form of a program, which is, it's online, it's free, it just kind of allows us to have a calling card. People can make a judgment based on that rather than just maybe some spin in a marketing document or, a very brief conversation. I think it's just easier and more transparent. It takes a little bit of pressure away, I think, Andrea, to just put it out there.
Yeah, I think it does, because, everyone has a commercial reality, right? Whether you are a client of an LSP, whether you're the LSP or whether you're a freelancer, everybody has, to deal with their own commercials and their own sort of, their own demands there. So what we've been trying with the course, as Rodrigo said, we've made it free. So it's really easy to access as well. It's just an e-learning. But what we've tried to put in there is, really sort of thorough information, that has been researched, that we, information that we have been working with in our sort of, in our daily working lives. So these are, we're explaining processes and concepts really that we've been working with for years. So we haven't put anything in there that is unproven or that we think people don't need, but we've really tried to make it relevant to the people who want to learn more about machine translation, about post editing, and now about AI and linguistic AI, which is the next, I think, big wave of changes that is coming our way.
So don't you think that it was a bit strange, because speaking from the other side, from the community of, from the supply chain point of view, which means freelancers really, and smaller LSPs and everybody else, or you can call them vendors or whatever you want. I mean, also the companies will give you different terminology for the group of freelancers or smaller LSPs that work with them. And I was at a point, of course, when the companies merged, that we had on the one side, we called it vendor management. On the other side, we called it supply chain and all of that. So it's like the words collided and then merged, and that's what happened. But isn't it interesting that we were still, I mean, the community, I guess, in general, on this side, on the commercial side, but it's just that we talk about the commercial side, talking about companies, when we forget that on the side of everybody else is also a commercial situation, right? It's always a commercial situation, but I guess we keep forgetting that. So how was it from your perspective for the community to, outside of the big LSP area, to receive this new, not so new, because for you nothing is new at this point, you've been there and you know exactly what happened and how it happened, but how was it to still be dealing with people who are not comfortable with machine translation, this terminology, I mean, right? The terminology machine translation, they saw it as the big bug, and now they see this other one thing, AI, as the Ripper himself, right? So has it been from your perspective that the rest of the world, like the people who work for you, have been receiving this change of concept, and what does it really entail in their workflow, really, to go from machine translation to AI? Because there's a moment here where they kind of intertwine or merge, and then one thing becomes the other. But there was a point, and I'm sure you were there to watch what happened.
I think that moment where we go from machine translation and only machine translation to AI is actually still happening, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, Rodrigo, I don't know if you disagree, but I think we are actually in it.
In the era of that.
Yes, in that, yes. Because obviously, with the arrival of ChatGPT, that was a real sort of, inflection point, right? And you suddenly could see, what AI can do. I think, what we sometimes forget is that machine translation, is really one of the earliest applications of AI. It's been around since the 1940s, 1950s in like more commercial settings, but I know there were first experiments in the 1800s, right, on doing that. So really, I've been reading up on that. That's how
I should do that. I like it.
It's a bit nerdy like that, but anyway. So
you should send me the references, because I need to read about that.
But so essentially now we've come a really long way with machine translation. As you know, we went through statistical, and then neural was the next big thing. And neural is really, it provides really good output, for a lot of languages. And I know there'll be people who disagree with that, and I think that's fair. But from our perspective, it really does. It really does help, because in the end, all it does is it gives you, instead of translating a sentence or a segment in a cattle from scratch, you have a pre-translation there, and you obviously try to work with that pre-translation to and sometimes that pre-translation, I think, can be pretty inspiring too, right? But now what we are talking about is things that aren't actually necessarily the machine translation itself, but things that bookend the machine translation on either side. So we are talking about things like quality estimation, where before you actually come to post editing, you get a label that says, this segment is good, this segment is adequate, this segment is, poor, for example. These are the labels we are, for example, using, but there might be others. And then that again has an impact on your working process, because that changes your working process. Because, for example, you may then want to say, okay, so if we have good segments, do they actually need to be post-edited? Or do we maybe just lock them for the post-editor and just let them look at the adequate and poor segments, so that they actually spend their effort on where it, on where they need to spend it? So, and that comes, I know that comes with a tail of questions afterwards as well, in sort of
For
what's going to
sure.
happen and so on. Yes, absolutely. But these are the considerations kind of thing. Or on the client side, and I think Rodrigo might want to speak more to that, is if I have a document which comes up with 80% of my segments are good, right? Do I actually need that document post-edited? Or will I run that with OMT? Or if I have 50-50, then I'll send my project to post-editing. So what it gives you in the end is different pathways to go down, and that will have an effect. And I think we don't quite know yet what that effect will do. I mean, us internally, we are running tests on that, but that is one of the things I think that will come. And then again, on the other side, you may want to say, okay, so yes, my project has been post-edited and my client is happy and all of that, but you might want to monitor much further, the health of your project, the health of post-editing for different languages. And you might go and say, okay, so let's do some comparisons here. Let's see, there were little changes for a certain language on a certain document type. So does that mean that the MT is really that good? Or does that mean maybe the post editor has not edited enough? So these are the things you're trying to figure out on the other side, because it's entirely possible that the MT is really that good, but it would be good to know that. So to keep track of the effort as well that you're doing. I don't know, Rodrigo, these are just a couple of examples, so that we are working with, I think. And another one now for our machine translation, because as you know, we work with our own proprietary machine translation, is adaptability. So you have, adaptive MT, right? There you can train on your own content, for example, and then get obviously better matching for terminology and style, all of that. So, or, provide automatic feedback, all these processes around it. I think they'll be much more influenced by AI, actually, so there's really different, it's quite a wide field in terms of where we can apply AI. And as I said, I think we're currently in the middle of figuring out what it all means and where we are going to go. And also when it comes to the GPT models, I think for some languages they provide great translations. For others, which are maybe a bit lower resource, they don't. But I mean, the thing is, they're not obviously created for translation. They're created as conversational AI for other use cases, really. But in the end, you can use sort of generative AI for different things, large language models like terminology extraction, for example, which sits on one end of the process, or you use it maybe to check the text afterwards for a certain style or tone. So these are things which are just some of the things that might come our way, to be honest. And that will then also change, of course, the work that people do. There might be a lot more fact checking when you work with an LLM. Neural machine translation hallucinates as well, but not to the extent that generative AI does, for example, that large language models do. So yeah, it's all these things, and some of them I think are still unknown.
Then that's the thing, right? You have an overview that is a bit privileged, because you kind of are already working on what's happening, and trying to come up with better solutions for whatever is not working so well from your point of view, right? What's the story with having AI in your title, Rodrigo? How has it affected your popularity?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of realized a few years ago, as we started to evolve, and this was before kind of the latest kind of, interest in AI, that we were talking more than just text in, text out, which is neural machine translation to some extent, and that there needed to be other things or other products that would help us. I think if we go back a little bit, I guess the idea of being led by ideas. One of the key ideas that was at the beginning is there's too much content. We have to find a way in which we can process content, and I think what happened was that we looked at content insight tools or quality estimation tools, which just allow us to kind of triage to, I think the worst thing that can happen is that somebody sends out a job to a freelancer, to a linguist, and the job isn't what they're expecting. And suddenly you've got a deadline. And so being able to kind of take a peek into, let's say, content at the beginning, what type of content, what kind of domain is it, what kind of complexity is there, how will machine translation work, with this particular content, if at all. Those decisions or those insights will then lead us to decisions right upstream, which don't then force a huge amount of disruption, stress into, I guess, the actual production, because by that time it's too late. There's a deadline. People have committed to that deadline, from the freelancer or the linguist to the customer as well. So I think I guess we want a smoother transition through the workflow so that those tools have to emerge. Human effort is at a premium, and so that we have to recognize that. There's a huge amount of experimentation going on at the moment, I think, with AI. And so I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we already have an idea that as many decisions that can be taken at the beginning of the process will probably lead to, I think, safer outcomes for all involved later on. I think that's pretty much where we're at the moment. I don't know. I think at the moment, in terms of AI, yes, I think if you have anything to do with AI, how can I put it? I think my parents have kind of known that I've been working steadily for a long period. I don't know if they necessarily appreciate exactly what I've done. I've gone from one term to another. So, I work in localization, okay, or now I'm in linguistic AI consultancy. I'm not going to one of my daughter's school kind of, sort of tell, dad tell us what he does for a job anytime soon, because it'd be really complex to explain. Yes. And by the time I've explained it, I think I would have lost interest of the audience. But it's certainly exciting. And I think it's a privilege to work in this area. I think we've gone full circle. Natural language processing was an AI problem that was right there at the beginning. And now, we've gone through so many different forms of AI that people have in their houses, in the domestic life, electric cars, et cetera. So there's lots of forms of AI that have evolved that may have sounded really quite exciting. And it's kind of strange and ironic now that we've kind of gone back to language. And, I think, if we go back, I think both myself and Andrea obviously have taken deliberate choices to work with language one way or another, commercializing it or the process of it. And we are committed to that. And I think we work in an industry where we work with lots of really heartfelt commitment. People really, appreciate language and they identify with it and it's part of their lives. They make decisions to go and live in other countries. They meet their partners because of language. It kind of binds us together. It's such a plethora of things that happen that once you're in it, you don't leave it.
I know.
You can't. I've got lots of probably wandering a little bit in what I'm saying, but I think that there is something here at the heart of it, which is pretty important to to the world, which is language. We talk about breaking the language barrier, and now language is at the heart of all these AI kind of I guess discussions, and their discussions have gone much further. So a few years ago, if I said machine translation, people might not have even really recognized what I was saying, if I meet other parents or, friends or stuff. But if I talk about AI, everybody now has a view on it. If I talk to my lawyer or my bank manager, they've heard about it now. ChatGPT, large language models, children are co-piloting already. The schools have to have guidelines on it. So it seems we're always going mainstream. So we started at post editing, I think, at some point. I think then later myself and Andrea started to kind of weave a different message, which was really around content. It was like, the content chooses the process. So, we kind of were very, I guess, clear on the customers had a particular audience. And so we do machine translation and they would have a content strategy and then they decide to fully post edit some content, fully post edit with a review, without a review, or light post editing. So the audience of the content, I guess, was at the heart of what human effort we put in place. And I think so we've gone from post editing to content strategy, and now we're in an AI paradigm where we're co-piloted, where we're able to perhaps use AI in the process to research better, make faster business decisions. And And that's all got to be worked out. I think that we're now at another inflection point where myself and Andrea are, I think we're sitting down, right, and Andrea, we're planning the next version of certification. It will quite clearly have new modules in there around large language models. It will also have modules about a number of other topics. As I was watching your podcast, I must say there are lots of topics that I might have heard about, but I started to kind of really understand how important they are. I mean, one of the things that I was very impressed with was a sense of agency that a lot of the people that you're interviewing, the translators had. I mean, if I go back to when I was younger, I don't think I had that sense of context around me, global context, and a sense of agency in terms of, okay, I'm going to go out and do a podcast, or I'm going to do a post, or I'm going to advertise myself. These are micro businesses.
Yep.
And so in that respect, I mean, to kind of bring it back round, I mean, yes, we are going through this transition, but I see lots of people making that transition, not with ease, but they're taking it on board quite easily, you know, in some respects, that they are kind of just incorporating it, and it's a natural progression for them. What seemed very difficult for us at the beginning, maybe 15 years ago, in trying to convince people, and there's lots of freelancers out there that have already taken this on board, and you see them weaving it into all the kind of things that they publicize on LinkedIn. So the AI is exciting. I'm glad to be in this space, and maybe I've got some experience in it, but I expect that we're going to be overtaken quite rapidly. You know, I think people will take to it much faster in the end. Humans are very adaptable. I don't know, and I mean, maybe, you know, the next version of certification, by the time we've tried to write it, you know, more events will have overtaken.
It's already obsolete.
I would say that, but let's hope not. But I mean, I'm sure, you know, I should probably run it past my children, to be honest, to make sure that it hits the right kind of, that it hits the right note. But I know this is a bit of a tangent, right? But I think, you know, I mean, my sons who are 17 and 19, they always think I grew up in the dark ages, you know, without computers, without smartphones, and they generally ask me all the time, oh my God, what did you do with your time? You know, how did you spend your time? I was like, well, you know, we did this and that, and then they go, oh yeah, well, whatever, we're not interested, we don't want to hear that. But you know, they're already, as a generation, right, they've grown up with so much technology, right, which you know, none of us, at least Rodrigo and I, you know, haven't, kind of thing. You know, we've come to technology as it developed, but, you know, we were already adults. But I think they're you know, so immersed in that already. I mean, you know, none of them would ever read a manual of something. You know, they go and watch a YouTube video, obviously. You know, so it's you know, I think you know, with technology changing, you know, people change as well. So you know, and I think in the end, you know, I think technology is neutral. It's what we do with it, you know, that can go in either direction, right?
For sure.
So but yeah, I mean, it's I do agree with Rodrigo. It's a really exciting space to be in. You know, of course, it doesn't feel like it did sort of, you know, 15 years ago when all this was beginning and so on. But you know, I think one of the things we also need to remember is that, you know, language has always been a difficult problem to solve with technology and AI. And I think it remains a difficult problem.
Look at the Babel Tower.
Yeah. So, you know,
it was a huge problem.
You're getting better at it, right? But that's why I think, you know, that's why we do this training. That's why we still do certification, because, you know, I don't think we'll lose people anytime soon, right? I think, you know, people and language, it's just connected, you know, it's how we engage, it's how we communicate, you know, it's how we manage and maintain our lives, really, you know, it's through communication. And then whether that communication is more technology driven or not, you know, I still think, you know, that there is a role, you know, for translators and for people in all of this.
I think we're going to lose tasks, but we're not going to lose people. And I think that's the normal thing. I mean, you know, that's happened.
Probably the terminology will also change, because translator means something that it will probably not be around as an activity for the coming years.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's going to change.
We often refer to linguists. I don't know if sometimes that's, you know, a term which, you know, depends. You can ask different people, but for some people it's more comfortable because it can encompass more things. It can encompass more roles or activities. And, you know, I think we published quite recently, or you published, Andrea, you know, a number of roles that will emerge with linguistic AI, you know, whether it's labeling data or whether it's quality checking. So in the end, language skills are really key to making sure that the technology evolves. We've always had a lot of feedback, right? And I think we've had to kind of, Andrea always say, you know, we're glad to get feedback. You know, we need something a bit more than just says, you know, oh, it was terrible, right? Or, we need to know why. You know, we need kind of structured feedback. But it's certainly something which, you know, the language skills are going to be at the heart of things. So we see that there's lots of workflows, technology workflows that, for instance, you know, they're bringing people and technology together. But below that, you've got a level of those people have expertise, and that technology is based on data. And it's the linguists, it's the translators are curating quality data for the machine learning to kind of benefit from. And then, you know, in the workflows, you're going through this workflow of, I guess, translating content, but at the same time, each time you're creating more and more data. So it's a kind of virtuous kind of cycle where we're creating content and data at the same time. And so we are, in some ways, kind of writing our own future as you get translators creating that data and that content.
That was beautiful.
So,
yes.
So you have to kind of, I don't know, for me, it's, I guess, you know, part of my experience, I think I've never been that attached to anything. I've lived in several countries, and so I'm not in any way particularly attached to one particular thing. I kind of realized, you know, that change is inevitable. My parents went to the UK. They never expected to go to the UK. It wasn't part of their plans. That, you know, the upheaval happened for political reasons, and then they just had to adapt. And then, you know, bit by bit, you know, my parents, you know, as kind of political exiles, migrants, that they needed to move around for jobs. You know, that was just the reality. They had to learn a language. It was just kind of like, you know, change and adapt or not survive. And so I think in that, I think I came to this particular industry where there's constant change, constant technology, which translators always, I think, you know, they're always expected to do. It's not a difficult thing for me, but it goes back to the idea of empathy. What's not difficult for me may be difficult for others. And that's where I think probably myself and Andrea have had a very useful relationship in one person sometimes having an idea and the other person saying, yeah, you might need to calibrate the message there. You know, there's nothing which I publish when I write that is not checked by Andrea, ever.
Oh,
never.
There you go.
A sense of reality.
That's a beautiful
you know.
thing. No, I mean, it's unbelievable because I understand, obviously, you have totally different backgrounds in terms of your original cultures and all of that. And the fact that you can, you know, sustain this relationship, it's a bit like no matter what happens, we know how valuable we are to each other, right? I guess.
Yeah, that is true. And, you know, the funny thing is that our children are fast friends as well.
Oh.
So there you go. They get on really well together.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. So this is what I like, is what I told you before, like, this is the idea of the podcast being the way it is, as in not really prepared. There's a few exceptions over there if I need to ask something very specific to someone or whatever. But usually I don't have anything prepared, exactly because this is what's interesting to me, because I always say, I even say it in the introduction, it's how you actually merge your personal lives with your work in language, because as Rodrigo said, and I could not agree more, it's like something that we choose to do. I mean, why else would we do it, right? It's not like any other job. It's a lot more personal, and it comes a lot from our own bodies and guts, the way we feel about all this, because language is just, you know, part of you in such a way. It's such a human thing that that's why, you know, we cannot forget ever the perspective of everybody else involved, and not just look at it from that one, you know, place where it will make you money, blah, blah, blah. It makes everybody money. It's true, or else people wouldn't be in the industry, because I mean, you can do it for pleasure. Obviously, I do a lot of things related to language for pleasure, but in the end, I also need to live to have my livelihood from all of those things too, right? So it has to play a really important part at some point, right? So this is sometimes
meaningful to us.
Yeah,
sure.
of course.
It definitely meaningful. And I think, strangely enough, for two people, myself and Andrea, that work in AI, we've worked with many people, and I think that, you know, it's the human relationships that are very important to sustain a project, especially over 15 years or 20 years. You know, it's the give and take. Sometimes you know, I think it's no surprise, but sometimes we fall out, you know, and then we have to have some elasticity in our relationship to come back together. In the end, we both care about the work that we do. So it's the very, I think sometimes with me, I need to kind of sit down and think, you know, what if I have to put this down in 2 or 3 words, you know, what is it, you know, and then I can kind of regain kind of the enthusiasm or what I need, but I have to write it down first, you know. And I think we talk about, I think, was it authentic AI powered by humans?
Yeah.
It has to be authentic AI, and that's what we're talking about. The authenticity is very key, I think, to us, you know.
Because you know, AI is in the end powered by humans, right? And I think that's what makes it authentic. And you know, and yeah, this is, I mean, you know, we really enjoy being in this space, but you know, the enjoyment also comes, you know, from bringing it to people. You know.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, on this note, we're going to stop this hour because, of course, we could just go on for a long time because, of course, I mean, I can only imagine all the things that you could get into as a conversation if we went to do details and things like that. So maybe one of these days we could have like a topic discussion because now you have that certification and everything planned. So you never know if we're going to talk about that, because that's a really important thing, because a lot of people don't have enough information on the subject. Maybe that's why they don't make informed decisions. We all know that that's the way it goes. Other people have a lot of knowledge about it. Other people feel comfortable with it. And so I guess it's very valuable that they know where to look for the information. So, you know, but for today, I guess I thank you very much for being here. I love having your perspective from someone who is such, you know, who has such an overview, because you're in a very particular position where like the majority of people cannot be, because it's where everything is happening. And so your opinion is absolutely essential to the rest of us to have, you know, to also make up our minds about a lot of things. So thank you so much for being here, and I hope we can talk soon.
That would be amazing.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a pleasure to have a chat. It was really nice. So yeah, we look forward to further conversations.
Okie dokie. So I'll see you guys soon, and I'll be following your posts and everything else now that I know that they are a joint venture between both of you. Thank you so much, and we'll talk soon. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.